criminals. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right. I promised that we'd be right back, and we are. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Appreciate you riding with us this morning. You know, part of our message is that we want to be a viable source of just the kernel of information that you need to be able to go out and make your own decisions. I'm not suggesting that I'm some expert on anything. I don't propose that I know more than you. I only want to make sure that I'm throwing stuff out there into the public arena for discussion and investigation. I can't do it all. I'm one person. I do this voluntarily, so I've got a full-time job that I've got to do and try to make a living on top of it. We don't make any money from this. I've never been paid a penny for doing it. And our job is really not to be some kind of investigative reporter. There's plenty of them out there. Now, I'll grant you that there's, not as many of them as I'd like to see. But our job is not to go out there and try to be an investigative reporter. My job is just simply to throw this stuff out there into the topic room and say, here you go. Here's something you may not have known about. Here's a way you can look at this and understand it. Here's one of the things that you can look at to understand how this impacts you. And then hopefully you'll say, wow, I need to educate myself more about that so that I fully understand the implications of what that means. Because that is what this is really all about. You know, you're supposed to, at the end of the day, say, I learned something, and now I'm required, because of what I learned, to educate myself more about that particular topic so that I can become a subject matter expert on it and be responsive about it. I can take action about it. I can take my circle of influence, whether that's my family or my friends at work or the people I go to church with or the community I'm in, or and I'm going to educate those around me about what I've now learned. That's the goal. So when we talk about things, please don't misunderstand. I'm not sitting here and saying I'm some be-all, end-all and wise wizard of Oz. The truth is, I'm just a regular guy who looks at everything in a perhaps a slightly different light, and then I hope that I'm giving you enough information so that it's intriguing enough for you to go out and do your own homework and research. If you can do that, if you'll do that, this show is successful. Not everybody looks at things that's going on around us in a manner which is realistically conducive to recognizing when you're being played. And that is part of what we've got going on here, is that the media is manipulating us through propaganda. And if that's all if all you watch is mainstream media, or all you read is mainstream newspapers, or perhaps you don't watch media at all, at least news, but you're influenced all day long by the commercials that come on during the sitcoms or the television programming that you watch. Let me tell you something. That's not a whole lot different than placing yourself in a position where you are scientifically brainwashed every day for a couple of hours. What do you think this is all about? Listen to the messages that you're getting from media when you watch television at night. They call it television programming for a reason. It is programming. I mean, really, guys, you got to look at this in the sense in which it's really, created. It's programming. And when you're watching a program, your mind is being altered by that program. You are being fed something. The question is, what are you being fed? Now, yesterday an article came out about Governor Walker out of Wisconsin. Now, the guy has been a point of contention for the liberal progressive movement because he went out there and he fought against the unions, and he has, been very, very aggressive about working. You remember the teachers unions that were, literally filling the Capitol and doing. I think they did $6 or $8 million worth of damage to the Capitol in their protestations against him and the policies he put in place to limit the power of unions in politics and in the lives of the union workers. Well, yesterday, an article came out about how dozens of conservative groups and folks that have allied themselves with Governor Walker are actually undergoing political persecution. And I use that word properly because a special prosecutor has been called up by the state government over there, and they've been issuing subpoenas. So let me explain to you the implications of this. Here you've got a police state on a state level. All governments, by the way, currently are operating under the rules of tyranny, and we've become this fascist, monster that's growing and morphing right before your very eyes. In other words, we were that nice guy that you went out to. Our governments are this nice guy that you went out to dinner with, and then suddenly the full moon came up and he started growing hair and claws, and his teeth came out. Well, subpoenas are being issued, and they are demanding correspondence, donor information from these organizations that have supported Scott Walker, and they are raiding individuals' homes and businesses. And these raids are being conducted that are resulting in law enforcement officers actually seizing and taking computers, files, documents, records, all in secret. Now, listen to the way in which this is being done, and you'll understand this is truly fascism in action. The Wall Street Journal put an article out about it in which they said, in recent weeks, Special Prosecutor Francis Schmitz has hit dozens of conservative groups with subpoenas, demanding documents related to the 2011 and 2012 campaigns to recall Governor Walker and state legislative leaders. Copies of two subpoenas we've seen demand, quote, all memoranda, email, correspondence, and communications, both internally and between the subpoena's target and some 29 different conservative groups, including Wisconsin and national nonprofit groups that backed and supported Walker. These are there, and there's political vendors involved in there and party committees. So they're actually going after groups like the League of American Voters, Wisconsin Family Action, Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, Americans for Prosperity, the division in Wisconsin, the chapter in Wisconsin, Americans for Prosperity from Wisconsin, American Crossroads, the Republican Governors Association, the Friends of Scott Walker Association, and the Republican Party of Wisconsin. Sorry, I'm in Missouri. He's in Wisconsin. So now let's just analyze that for a moment. You have subpoenas being issued by a police state against an actual party, the Republican Party itself, demanding email, memos, correspondence, communications, seizing computers, seizing files and records. Wait a minute, it gets better. These groups are being targeted under something called the John Doe law that exists in Wisconsin. Don't ask me where this thing came from. Probably just another administrative agency abuse. The John Doe law in Wisconsin says the following. You cannot defend yourself publicly, and here's the reason why. The law, quote, bars a subpoena target. In other words, the Republican Party, the Republican Governors Association, the Americans for Prosperity Wisconsin, Wisconsin Manufacturers Commerce, right? All those groups I just mentioned. Quote, bars a subpoena's target from disclosing its contents, the contents of the subpoena, to anyone but his attorneys. John Doe probes work much like a grand jury, allowing a prosecutor to issue a subpoena and conduct a search, while a gag order leaves the targets facing the resource of the state with no way to publicly defend themselves. Okay. To me, this is so Nazi. That's the only word I can think of it. This is like the Stasi or the KGB, who come in and kick in your door and say, we've got a warrant and we're searching for this. And they tear your house up, and then they say, now, here's a follow-up to that warrant. If you discuss this with anyone, you're subject to criminal prosecution. Well, how do I know the warrant's legal? Doesn't matter. You can't question it. I mean, don't you smell the tyranny? Don't you smell the fascism in this? The report that's out here and that says that these orders began in, and here's where the rub really comes, because this shows you that it's a political persecution, not political prosecution, a persecution. You've got the liberal progressive Democrats who are actively going out there and subpoenaing their opponents' records. This is unbelievable. It began in the Milwaukee County Assistant District Attorney, the office of Bruce Landgraf. Now, this occurred just days before a woman by the name of Mary Burke, a Democrat, announced that she was going to be running for governor of the state. Uh-oh. This sounds to me like Nixonian Watergate legalized. Landgraf works, and he's the assistant district attorney. He works for the Milwaukee County Democrat District Attorney John Chisholm. John Chisholm. Now, Chisholm is the guy who led the effort against the Wisconsin governor and the supporters of his in the past. And this is the second time that he has done one of these John Doe investigations in the last 3.5 years. So what this really is a fishing expedition being done by a guy who has the power to be abusive with that authority. He is abusing the power and the authority of his office as a district attorney, and he's using it for political purposes, not for law enforcement, not for true justice, not in the purposes of saying, I'm here to, stop crime or anything along those lines, purely as a political weapon. And he's using it as a weapon of mass destruction. If you don't see fascism in the police state completely, utterly, totally exposed and at work here, you've got your head in the sand. And this is a microcosm of what you will begin to see going on around the country. In fact, you've already seen it. Here's where I'm going to draw the correlation and tie the two together. The IRS has been doing the same thing on a national scale. Look, ladies and gentlemen, when you have one political party that has the power and the authority to abuse their position, to persecute the opposing party, this is the snake eating its own tail. That's exactly what this is. At some point, what we will have is one party, because the other party will be either co-opted, coerced, or marginalized to the point where they no longer exist, or they have no power and no force and no effect. And when you have one party, you have what? Let me hear it. Okay, you have fascism. We already have a police state that it's got everyone under surveillance, including all politicians, including anybody who might run for office, including the ability to go out there and empty a dossier on anybody who is running for office to see what is available for us to use against him to block him from being successful in his bid for office, because he's seeking to overturn the same tyranny that we're all smelling and seeing and recognizing for what it is. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, you got to admit, this is insane. This is not the America I understand. This is not the America that our Constitution has created. This is beginning to smell more like Soviet Russia or Stalinist Russia or Hitler's Nazi state, police state, or Pol Pot. I mean, the Mao's great revolution, the People's Revolution. Don't you see it? It's everywhere around you. Here's where it gets ugly. Eric O'Keefe, he's the director for the Wisconsin Club for Growth, and one of the groups that's been targeted. Here's what he says. He knows of at least 3 targets who have had their homes raided. But here's the problem. There's a lot more than 3, but they're barred and prohibited from speaking out. They've got a gag order on them. That's unconscionable. It's unethical. It's immoral. It's more than likely, well, it's constitutionally illegal. It may not be illegal based on all of these fake laws that they've passed. But let me tell you something. There is nothing ideologically sound that can back up this argument. I don't care which party you're from. Nothing. Nothing can justify this. There is no rationalization you can give me that says this is acceptable behavior. And I don't care whether you're a Democrat or a progressive or a liberal. I don't care whether you're a conservative or a Republican, a patriot. Nothing justifies this. Nothing. This is pure intimidation and persecution. And if they can do it to political parties, what's going to happen when they start doing it to your church, to your school, to your place of business, to your home? We are living and witnessing right now, in our at this very moment, the rise of a level of fascism which no one in the United States had ever dreamed would be possible. You are living it right now. This will go down in history as the period when the people were so shocked and stunned they didn't know what to do. They couldn't believe that it was actually happening. This is what kids are going to be reading 50 years from now. I'm telling you right now. This is going to go down in history as the same way that people said, didn't they recognize that those cars that were driving by on the way to Auschwitz were full of people? I mean, why didn't somebody stand up? The truth of the matter is, your fear of prosecution, persecution, targeting, that should tell you everything that you need to know about why this nation must arise. That we, the sheeple, must take off the coat of the sheep and put on the coat of the wolf. That it is time for us to become aggressive in our demand for to take our government back from tyrants and reinstitute our government as a constitutional republic, where the Constitution is the guiding rule of law. To place the Constitution back into its appropriate place. Now, I don't want to do it violently. I seek to do this in a peaceful method. So those of you who are out there, speech to texting this at the NSA Storage Document Center, you can't take this and misconstrue it. By the way, I need someone who can transcribe these radio programs. If somebody at the NSA who's listening would be willing to just email them to me daily after you're done, I would appreciate that, because you could save me the time, and I can't find the volunteer to do it anyway. And since our taxpayer dollars are paying you guys, maybe you wouldn't mind. Just email it to me at the end of the day. We all know you're getting it anyway. Is that an absurd statement for me to have to make? You know what's even more funny? You knew exactly what I meant. And you knew exactly why I said it, and you agreed. They are monitoring it. They're probably sitting there converting this radio program daily to text. Don't you see it? You don't have to smell the smoke anymore, folks. You don't have to look for it. It's not like do you smell some smoke or something? It's a raging fire, and it's burning all around you, and your skin is hot to the touch. But like blind people, we have refused to say, I guess we got to go do something about this. I guess we better exit the building before we become engulfed in the flames ourselves. These warrants are being executed based on the request of a guy by the name of Dean Nickel. They are confiscating computers. They are confiscating files. And this guy, Dean Nickel, he's the guy who is filed an affidavit for probable cause in the court. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. Nickel is the former head of the Wisconsin Department of Justice Public Integrity Unit. Boy, if that's not a name similar to the Affordable Care Act that is diametrically opposed to its namesake, I don't know what is, right? He's the head of the Department of Justice Public Integrity Unit. That is kind of like jumbo shrimp. Yeah, oxymoron. Baby grand piano. Anyway, he's worked as an investigator for the GAB, and the Nickel has stated to the Wall Street Journal that he is a contractor for this group and wouldn't discuss the John Doe probes. Their general counsel has declined to comment. The people who are receiving these subpoenas are gagged from discussing them. They cannot talk about either the provisions for the subpoena, the subpoena itself, or what has been confiscated, except to their lawyer. Well, there's a group out there called watchdog.org. And they've been looking into this, and they're just flat out stating this is a taxpayer-funded campaign simply to defeat the opposition in this upcoming governor's race. This is a taxpayer opposition research campaign. Taxpayer-funded opposition research campaign. This is not a question of what conservatives did wrong. It's a question of one party in the state using the prosecutorial powers to conduct a one-sided investigation into conservatives. Investigators are spying on people and using the power of government to collect records. Ladies and gentlemen, that itself, that statement, is the very definition of tyranny. Meanwhile, we've got guys like Eric Holder who, when they're asked by Congress, who is their overseer, their watchdog, to produce the documents related to Fast and Furious, he says, nah, I don't have to. I mean, that's the equivalent of your boss calling you in and saying, listen, I need to see your customer list. And you say, no. And he says, well, wait a second now. We're paying you. We pay your vehicle costs. You go out to see those customers on our behalf. You show them a business card with your name and our name on it. You sell them our products. Those aren't your customers. They're our customers. And the guy says, no, I'm not going to give it to you. Well, in the real world, that guy would be walking out the door, and he would be escorted by security so that he wouldn't have a chance to go back to his desk and hide the files. That's the truth. In this case, Eric Holder says, not only am I not going to give you the files, but I'm going to ask my daddy to come in and say, nope, he's under my protection, you can't have him. That would be President Obama. Ladies and gentlemen, don't you smell what's going on? The stink, the stench, the aura around this government, the aura around government, period, and what it's descended to. State governments, federal governments, all of them. Do you not smell the stench of death and corruption? I'm seeing local community governments that are also going this same way. I'm hearing from people all over the country who follow this program. I get emails from them. You should see what my city council did, or you should see what my county government did, or you should see what my state just passed. It's everywhere, and it's spreading like wildfire. Meanwhile, you have law enforcement being militarized, beefed up, and given extraordinary power. Not to mention extraordinary amounts of equipment and training with which to abuse that power. I submit to you as an American citizen that you are living through the early stages of tyranny and fascism in the United States of America. And I'm going to tell you right now that your children and your grandchildren are going to be reading about you in the history books and saying, I wonder why Grandma and Grandpa didn't stop that. I wonder why they didn't stand up and say, okay, this is enough. This is the kind of thing that we all read when we were in school about, the Nazi atrocities. And we said, well, why didn't the average person stand up and say, hey, wait a second. You can't steal that guy's stuff and put him in a train car and take him off and make him work in a slave labor camp and then bake him in an oven. But by then, you see, the fascism, the terror, the tyranny, the government-sponsored terrorism was so engaged, was so integral, was so complete that everyone was afraid to speak. Everyone that wasn't profiting from it. And society became reduced down to two things. Those who benefit and those who are afraid to speak out. I submit to you that we are about there. Early warning. Don't you hear the klaxon? Whoop, 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 whoop. We're going to take a break. When I return, we're going to talk about our last and final topic. $1 trillion in new debt has been created by the government in just the last 30 days. $1 trillion. Yeah. And guess what? There's no cap between now and February. And in February, they get to do it all over again. And we have no idea how much they're going to ask for then. You're listening to America's Voice. If you like this topic or this segment, if you've got some idea, you want to have some input on this, please feel free to email me. You can email me by going to sending me an email to mike@americasvoicenow.org. You can also contact us on our website at americasvoicenow.org. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. And you can also find us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. If you get to our Facebook page and you're a user of Facebook, please hit the like button. Helps us to spread the word not only on our timeline but on yours. And at the same point in time, it lets us know that there's folks out there listening and paying attention and doing their best to restore our country to a constitutional republic as guaranteed by our founders and our government when it was actually operating as a government instead of a tyrant. We'll be right back.